Well, now that you're all ready to sew, let's go through the basic parts of the machine before we get started. Over here on this end, this is your USB port, and you'll use this for embroidery. This is going to let you transfer designs that you get off the internet to your machine. On-off switch, your foot pedal, and where you plug in the cord. This is your hand wheel. You can turn it towards the front of the machine anytime you need to move the needle. And there is a ridge up here. When you line it up with this crack, that means your needle is in the uppermost position. Now let's look at the back. There's really only one thing to mention here, and that's going to be your feed dog switch. In this position, your feed dogs are engaged. If you need to disengage them, you slide that towards the body of the machine. And then to get them back in, it goes this way. Now your feed dogs are these little metal teeth looking things under here, and what they do is they move the fabric under the needle, whether forward or reverse. But those teeth come up and they move, and they are running the fabric through here. So if you disengage them, it drops them down so that they're not moving the fabric. And we'll be using that for embroidery and quilting maybe. Now let's look on this end. This is a thread cutter. If you don't want to use the automatic thread cutter, you can just take your thread, wrap it down there, and it cuts it right off. This was your automatic needle threader. And now I want to, while we're here, let's look at your presser foot. This machine has snap-on presser feet, so when you want to change them, all you do is press this black lever right here, and you see how it just fell off? Then to put it back on, you line up the bar. There's a little bar under here, and then there's a U-shaped gap right there. So when you line the bar up under there and then you drop your foot down, it just clicks. Just like that. Okay? Now, sometimes you're not just going to want to take the foot off, but you're going to want to take the holder off. That's where your screwdriver will come in handy. You'll unscrew it. That drops right off. And because some feet already have the holder attached. So anyway, that's how you put it right back on. And then we'll line the bar up under there. Drop that down. Click. Okay. One other thing, this thing that goes down here, this lever, this engages your buttonhole action, so we will look at that in more detail when we get to the buttonholes. But anyway, there that is. Now for the front of the machine. First of all, this is a storage cabinet. If you lift up right here, there's room for storage in here to put your accessories. Alright, let's talk about under here. There's a grid under here, and there's no way I'm going to be able to get you a good shot of this. So if you have your machine, just look under here. These are measurements, and they have inches and they have millimeters. This is your seam allowance guide. When you put fabric under your needle, under your presser foot, you line your edge up with one of these guides. That way you're sewing straight. Now the measurement will depend on your pattern or what you're trying to do. If you're quilting, you usually want a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and the 1/4 inch is up here at the front because that's going to be pretty close to the middle of your foot. There's 5/8, there's 1 inch. All your measurements are right here. Now the important thing is to know, are they accurate? Anytime I get a new machine, I always test these. And this machine, the default needle position is over here on the left. So I measured it, and that's where the measurements are accurate for. So if you move your needle over to the center, you're going to have to adjust your seam allowance guides. And I usually do that with just a little piece of tape. I figure out where I need my fabric edge to go, and I run a little piece of tape there while I'm doing whatever that sewing is. Okay, this is your tension on your upper thread. I'm going to leave it at 4 for right now because that's where it came. Bobbin has a tension also, and it's more about getting the tensions balanced than it is which one is correct or not. The bobbin tension is extremely difficult to change, and it's very sensitive. So usually You know, unless you get a problem, you're going to leave your bobbin tension alone, and you're just going to adjust your top thread tension to suit. Okay, this button right here that is now red, that's your start stop button. It has 3 colors, red, orange, and green. Right now it's red. The reasons it can be red are maybe your presser foot is up. See, now it turned green. It can also be red if you have the foot plugged in. Now see, if I push this now, it's going to go by itself. If I plug in the foot and then try to push this button, it's not going to go because the foot pedal is plugged in. So if you're trying to make it go by itself, you have to unplug the foot pedal. Now another thing, it can be orange. If it's orange, that means your bobbin spindle is pulled over to the right. This next button up here is your reverse or reinforcement stitch. Reverse means it goes backwards. Reinforcement means that it sews 3 to 5 stitches in the same exact spot. Now you've got one button that does 2 things. What's going to determine whether it reverses or reinforces is going to be which stitch you select, and we'll talk about that when we get into the menu. This is your needle up down button. If the needle is up, it puts it down. If it's down, it puts it up. So if you push that, the needle goes down. Push it again, it goes up. This is your thread cutter. If you're sewing and you don't want to come all the way to the side, you can press this button and it cuts your threads off. It's really handy. This is your speed control. Now if you have it set on the lowest setting, it doesn't matter how hard you press that pedal, it's not going to go any faster. That's really useful if you are a new sewer and you're a little bit unsure about what you're doing. That way you know you're not just going to fly through it. So, alright, over here on this screen, this button returns you to the previous page. So wherever you are, if you get somewhere you don't want to be, you can press the back button. Now once you're on this menu, this just leads you to all the different sets of stitches, and we're going to be looking at set number 1. Alright, this button right here actually locks your machine. That's very good to do when you're changing a needle or doing anything with your hands up under it while your machine is on. You can lock it real quick and you don't have the possibility of sewing through your finger. That unlocks it. Your arrows are what take you through the pages of your menu. For example, this first menu has 5 pages of different stitches. Right? This one takes you right back here where you can select either a utility stitch or a decorative stitch. This button is going to take you to the embroidery screen, which we're going to look at later. This button is your settings. So if you want to go through here and change some of your settings, I haven't decided exactly anything I need to change yet. I thought about changing initial needle position to the center, but then I figured out that my guidelines are set for the left position. There was one, if you go through here, the opening screen, I'm going to turn mine off now so that it doesn't keep going off. Alright, so that is pretty much all of the basics. We'll go into some of the other things as we go along. Let's just go ahead and run some fabric under here so we can look at how it stitches. Now, it is set for the 101. This is set number 1, stitch number 1, which is a straight stitch. And I am going to, here's your adjustments right here. I'm going to go ahead and increase that to a 3.5 millimeter stitch, a little bit longer. But otherwise, I'm just going to leave it just like it is. I'm going to raise my presser foot and get my threads under there. Put some fabric. I'm not even worried about a seam allowance right now. I just want to sew a seam. Now, if you want to lock your stitches at the beginning and the end, that's where your reverse button is going to come in. You can press it and it will sew backwards for as long as you hold it down. Okay? Now, If you don't have your foot pedal engaged, you could press that and it's going to sew forward. But since I do, I'm going to have to use the foot pedal. So let's give it a little gas. There we go. Now, if you want to lock the end of it, you press the reverse for a couple more stitches and then you can go back forward. Okay? Now, my needle is in the down position, so I'm going to raise it up to remove my fabric. I'm going to lift my foot, and I could have gone ahead and cut the thread. I'm just not in that habit yet, so I'm going to bring it to the side and cut it. And this is what your first seam looks like on the front. This is on the back. Really nice seam there. I'm very impressed. So one last thing, I want to show you how to change your needle. I do have a video about how to choose the correct needle, and I will link to that. Hopefully I won't forget. But you do have to change needles regularly. That's why they already come with a package of, this one came with 6 extra needles. I change my needles after every project unless I start having a problem. If you start noticing that your stitches are skipping, they're not they're going kind of crooked, the first thing I do is get a fresh needle. Plus, they roll those things out by the thousands. Some of them are going to be, bad needles. All right, when you get ready to change your needle, first of all, lock your machine. The next thing I'm going to suggest you do is cover up the hole with a sticky note or a piece of paper or some washi tape or whatever. And that is because when you unscrew this, sometimes the needle just falls right out. And then where does it fall? Well, if there's a hole down there, it falls into the hole. So you don't want to have that. All right, I've got my thread out. Now, to change your needle, you're going to come over here to this top screw and you're going to turn it lefty-loosey, holding onto the needle. Once you break it down, you can pretty much just do it by finger. Okay? Now, there comes your needle. Now that you're ready to put your new needle back in, you want the flat side of the top of the needle to the back, and it's going to go right in there, right underneath the 6, and it will only go in there with the back, with the flat side to the back. So you just get it right there under the 6, slip it up there as far as it'll go, and then you're going to start twisting this to tighten it back down. Okay, and finger tight is good. If you want to get your screwdriver and tighten it up just a tad more, that's always a good idea. Just like that. And then raise your foot, take your paper off. And one last tip, when you get ready to unthread your machine and you're ready to put new thread in it, don't pull your thread backwards. Snip your thread at the spool and pull it through those guides frontwards. The tension guide in there is set for thread to come through, one direction. So if you continually keep snatching it out, then it just wears out sooner. I've never worn one out myself, but it's an easy practice to get into the habit of. So I hope that helped you. The next thing we're going to do is start going through the menus and looking at each stitch, and then we'll work our way into the embroidery function of the machine, which I am super excited about. So I'll see you back here next time at Mom's.